Have you ever sent someone a message, watched it get marked as seen, and then nothing? No reply, no explanation, no apology, just silence. At first you tell yourself they're probably busy, but as the minutes turn into hours and the hours turn into days, your mind begins creating stories of its own. Did I say something wrong? Maybe they're upset with me. Maybe I don't matter to them anymore. What's strange is that nothing has actually happened. No one insulted you. No one yelled at you. No one told you that you weren't important. And yet your chest feels heavy, your thoughts become louder, and your heart carries a pain that seems impossible to explain. Why can being ignored hurt more than being criticized? Why does silence sometimes feel louder than words? And why does one unanswered message have the power to ruin an entire day? The answer has very little to do with your phone or the other person. It has everything to do with a survival system hidden deep inside your brain. One that was built tens of thousands of years before smartphones, social media, or text messages ever existed. To understand why being ignored hurts so much, we have to travel back nearly 50,000 years. Imagine one of your ancestors living in a small tribe of 30 or 40 people. Every meal, every shelter, every source of protection came from that group. If the tribe accepted you, you survived. If the tribe rejected you, your chances of surviving alone became dangerously small. There were predators in the wilderness, limited food, harsh weather, and countless threats that one person could rarely face alone. For our ancestors, being ignored wasn't simply uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Over thousands of generations, evolution rewarded brains that treated social rejection as a serious threat. Slowly, the human brain developed a powerful survival rule. Belonging means safety. Rejection means danger. Although the modern world has changed dramatically, your brain still follows that ancient rule. Today, someone leaving your message unanswered doesn't threaten your survival, but your brain doesn't always recognize the difference. To your nervous system, social exclusion still activates ancient alarm systems designed to keep you connected to the group. This is why modern neuroscience has discovered something extraordinary. The same brain regions involved in processing physical pain also become active during experiences of social rejection. In other words, your brain doesn't completely separate emotional pain from physical pain. That's why heartbreak can feel like a weight on your chest. That's why rejection can make your stomach tighten. That's why being ignored can leave you emotionally exhausted, even though nothing physical has happened. Your brain isn't overreacting by accident. It's responding according to survival software written thousands of generations ago. But perhaps the most fascinating part is not rejection itself, it's uncertainty. If someone honestly tells you, "I don't agree with you," or "I don't want to continue this relationship," it hurts, but at least your brain has an answer. Silence is different. Silence creates unanswered questions, and the human brain hates unanswered questions. Whenever information is missing, your brain automatically begins filling in the gaps. Unfortunately, it rarely fills them with positive explanations. It doesn't naturally think, "They're probably busy, maybe their phone died, perhaps they're dealing with something difficult." Instead, it prepares for the worst. Maybe they don't like me anymore. Maybe I embarrassed myself. Maybe I'm not important. Why? Because throughout evolution, assuming the worst often increased the chances of survival. A cautious brain lived longer than an overly optimistic one. Modern technology has quietly made this ancient survival system even stronger. Every notification, every reply, every like, every comment gives your brain a small burst of dopamine, the chemical associated with anticipation and reward. Over time, your brain begins expecting these signals of social connection. When they suddenly disappear, something feels wrong. That's why many people check their phones dozens or even hundreds of times a day without realizing it. They aren't simply checking for messages, they're checking for reassurance that they still belong, that they still matter, that they're still connected. The problem is that when another person's attention becomes the source of your emotional stability, your happiness slowly slips out of your own hands. One reply can brighten your entire day. One unanswered message can destroy it. And perhaps that's the most important question of all. Is your worth really determined by someone else's attention? Or has your ancient brain simply confused attention with survival? The answer to that question may completely change the way you understand rejection, relationships, and even yourself. Because in the next chapter, you'll discover why people don't always ignore you for the reasons you imagine, why your brain often creates stories that aren't true, and how understanding the psychology of rejection can free you from one of the deepest emotional pains every human being experiences. One of the biggest mistakes we make is believing that when someone ignores us, we automatically know why. But the truth is, we usually don't. The moment another person's behavior becomes unclear, your brain immediately begins searching for an explanation. The problem is that it doesn't search for the most accurate explanation. It searches for the one that best protects you from potential danger. Throughout human history, waiting too long to understand another person's intentions could have been costly. If someone in your tribe suddenly stopped talking to you, became distant, or acted differently, your brain couldn't afford to ignore those signals. It had to predict what might happen next. That ancient prediction system still operates today, but instead of helping you avoid predators, it often creates painful stories that exist only inside your own mind. Imagine a friend who doesn't reply for 2 days. During those 2 days, dozens of explanations are possible. They might be overwhelmed with work. They could be dealing with family problems. Their phone might be broken. They may simply need time alone. Yet your brain rarely chooses those possibilities first. Instead it whispers, "They're losing interest. You said something stupid. They don't respect you anymore. Notice something remarkable?" Not because it's trying to hurt you, but because it believes identifying a possible mistake will protect you in the future. This is closely connected to something psychologists call the negativity bias. Your brain naturally pays more attention to negative possibilities than positive ones because, throughout evolution, overlooking a threat was far more dangerous than overlooking good news. If your ancestors mistakenly assumed a rustling bush contained a predator, they wasted a little energy by running away. But if they assumed everything was safe when it wasn't, the consequences could be fatal. Evolution therefore built a brain that constantly asks, what could go wrong? That ancient question still shapes modern relationships. A delayed reply becomes rejection. A distracted expression becomes disapproval. A quiet conversation becomes evidence that people are talking about you. Often none of these conclusions are true, but your brain treats them as if they are. Another invisible force at work is something called the Frost spotlight effect. Human beings naturally overestimate how much other people notice and think about them. We imagine everyone remembers our awkward moments, our mistakes, our embarrassing comments, or the message we wish we had never sent. In reality, most people are far too busy worrying about themselves to spend much time thinking about us. Every person you meet is living inside their own story, fighting their own battles, carrying their own fears. Yet your brain quietly places you at the center of every social situation because your own survival has always been its highest priority. This makes being ignored feel deeply personal, even when it often has very little to do with you. Modern life has amplified this problem in ways our ancestors could never have imagined. Social media constantly exposes us to visible signs of attention and rejection. We know who viewed our story, who liked our photo, who replied instantly to someone else, but not to us. Our brains interpret these tiny digital signals as meaningful social information, even though they rarely reveal the full picture. A person might ignore a message simply because they're mentally exhausted, yet your brain interprets the silence as proof that you've lost your value. The more often this happens, the stronger those emotional pathways become. Eventually, your self-worth begins depending on external attention instead of internal confidence. Perhaps the most painful part is that many people respond to being ignored by trying even harder to earn attention. They send another message, they over-explain themselves, they become someone they're not just to avoid rejection. Without realizing it, they hand over control of their emotional state to another person. But genuine confidence has never been built by chasing approval. It grows when you realize that another person's attention is information, not a measurement of your worth. Some people will value you, others won't. Some relationships naturally fade, others grow stronger. None of these outcomes can fully define who you are unless you allow them to. And that leads to the most important question of all. If your brain naturally exaggerates rejection, invents painful stories, and ties your self-worth to other people's attention, how do you break free? How do you stop letting silence control your emotions? The answer isn't learning how to make everyone notice you. It's learning why your value is never supposed to depend on being noticed in the first place. That realization changes everything. And it's exactly where our journey ends in the final chapter. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the people who ignore you no longer have the power to control your emotions. They still don't reply immediately. Some people still leave. Others still lose interest. But something inside you has changed. Their silence no longer feels like proof that you're not enough. Instead, it becomes just another piece of information. That may sound impossible, but this is exactly what